Let's face it, being in our 20s is one of the most confusing times. What is my purpose? What makes me happy? How will I achieve my dreams? Some of us spend our entire lives trying to figure it out. Yeah, it's not easy, but there's always a way. My way. I'm Jazzy, and I'm in the process of paving my own path in this journey we call life. Will you share your My Way with me?
This is Eric Kim, and this is My Way.
Hi, Jasmine. I'm doing well. How are you? Same here in the Bay Area, and I'm just so thankful for the blue skies that we had today. It's been a little bit up and down because of the wildfires, but today is looking pretty good. I mean, it's just adding to 2020, right? But I do think, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but there is no normal anymore, and I think actually it's just another reminder that um, you know, the goal is not to get back to normal in many ways. It's actually to embrace change. And we've had the global pandemic of COVID-19, the ongoing pandemic of racism and, wildfires. I think we're just really realizing that change is upon us. I think we're all just trying to embrace it. Well, I like to make a joke that my mom and dad are still waiting for me to become a medical doctor. They're not quite sure what I still do as a venture capitalist itself, but I love you, mom and dad. And I do think that growing up, it did play a big role in my life in terms of guiding me to where I am today. But it's actually the part of the Asian American experience that I'm so proud of is my parents' willingness to come to America to be on this entrepreneurial journey themselves. And I think that really imprinted upon me a really unique experience. I grew up actually in a predominantly white area in St. Louis, Missouri. There weren't a lot of Asian Americans around, frankly. But again, I think that was really influential to me to have both cultures, to be multicultural, to have this strong ethnic background to me from my parents immigrating in the early 70s, to also really embrace a lot of Americana, so to speak, growing up in Missouri itself. Obviously, there were a lot of challenges through that, but I'm very thankful for it looking back today. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that for them, it they came to this country for the opportunity for their kids to have a better life. That they grew up in war torn Korea. My parents told me stories about you know being having to be essentially refugees to the southern tip of South Korea during the Korean War. My mom still has frostbite scars on her toes from that time. They used to stick money in her hat in case she would get lost. Kids were became orphans during that period, just lost during the migration. And so, for them, the idea of being able to come to the United States to have a better life for their kids, um, becoming a doctor or something that monetarily at least will provide security for their children meant a lot for them. I think that was something that was always in the back of my mind. I actually grew up as a fairly serious cellist and I loved music, but there was a point in time where I was even considering going to conservatory. But my parents, frankly, had this very pragmatic and practical view that that is something that you could always pursue at some point in your life or be part of you. Maybe they also knew that I just wasn't good enough to cut it. I think they always guided me to have some kind of stability in my future. But at the same time, alongside that pragmatic view, they also instilled a great sense of entrepreneurship in me. My grandfather survived post Japanese colonization in South Korea, as well as it was a very hard time as well. And he had to become an entrepreneur as well. I think that entrepreneurial spirit, though they joke about becoming a medical doctor and those things, was really passed down to myself and my sisters. And so I think that is really the immigrant's experience, is to actually to be an entrepreneur in this country, and that's something that I hopefully have been able to carry on. Obviously, practically speaking, I think every generation from this point on, I would hope for my kids that they could even push the boundaries of that even more. That the idea of maybe not even have to go to college or to get certain degrees, I saw those for me as a stepping stone to have the credentials and to be in a position to pursue my dreams. At some point, being able to be in a position, and I think for Asian Americans in this country overall, that is where, in many ways, coming of age and to be able to be in a position where you don't have to check all those boxes per se. Frankly, I probably didn't even have to do that either. It was just my path, and everyone's path is different. So I'm excited about the trajectory that we're on, and very thankful to my parents for that influence of entrepreneurship, while also being very pragmatic too. Yeah, when I was growing up, a friend of mine had given me these CDs by the Yale Cello, so I think I was fairly young at that point, just starting out on cello. And I was like, for me, they were like the Backstreet Boys. It was like, it was such like to hear their sound and the harmonies, and just the way they pursued music, the way that they would portray themselves. Their kind of tagline in many ways was like, play like this is the last chance you have to play. When I went to Yale, there was no guarantee that I would be able to play with them, but I had a chance to join them my junior year, because they're actually a graduate school music group, and I was able to audition, and was really fortunate to tour the world with them, um, and it was really cool to be, in my view, like a little bit of a Backstreet Boy in my own right for a little bit, but
Mhm.
obviously they were great, and I was just honored to be a little bit part of it. Yeah, I think one of the most formative experiences for me when I was at Yale was actually 9/11. So I was a senior walking to actually my Korean language class on campus, I remember, and news of the, the attack in DC and also the Twin Towers starting to spread on campus at that time. And everyone was in shock and disbelief. And, one of the most important values I learned through that was the importance of community, the
Mm.
importance of coming together for one another. And when again I was a pretty active musician on campus, we had formed this group called the Musical Cure at Yale. When we were there to do basically benefit concerts and go out to soup kitchens or cancer wards and play live concert for those who couldn't access a live classical music as a way of healing or a way of bringing the community together. When 9/11 happened, we decided to do the series of benefit concerts, essentially, to bring the community together. And we brought a really diverse set of music. It wasn't just the Yale cellos, it was also an African drumming group, it was a Korean instrumental group together. It was the Whiff and Poofs. It was a whole variety of different genres coming together to create something beautiful amidst tragedy. And
Mhm.
so for me, when I was at Yale, I I remember, obviously I met my wife there, which is numero uno, right? That's the most important thing. But in
Mhm.
terms of like the value that I learned, or the core values that I learned, I think it was around the power of community and the importance of community and coming together. And we saw that with 9/11. We saw people coming together with these benefit concerts and supporting each other, not just through the concerts, but in other ways as well. And I think that has always been part of me throughout the rest of my life and to today. That's why I love consumer tech investing at
Mhm.
Goodwater. That's why I love venture capital investing, specifically around network effect businesses. So if you
Mhm.
think about a Facebook or a TikTok or even think bigger than that. Think Netflix or fintech platforms, Venmo, the peer-to-peer payments, even telemedicine, the network effects of having more and more doctors online, so more and more patients can access this through digital means. Network effects is an expression of community. It enables community as well. And I think that is just such an important, it's like part of our human condition and existence, that we are part of a community, and that community tools like these digital tools that we're investing here at Goodwater actually enable and foster community more broadly as well. Yeah, I mean, my wife might have some other thoughts around this, but I'll speak from my own perspective. Um, I do think that there, especially I think enhanced in the COVID-19 times, what was considered normal or traditional is really being challenged right now, and I think for the good. That if you even look back, there's this great book called The 12 Diseases That Changed the World. I haven't read it fully yet. One of our investors recommended to me, but one of the anecdotes that he told me about was that prior to the Black Plague, you actually had to be in one of these centers of excellence. You had to be in Florence or Venice, where education was really centered in those areas. And if you wanted to be anyone, you had to be able to go to those places. But following the Black Plague, no one wanted to be in these dense cities. And basically, education opportunity was spread across Europe and then the rest of the world in many ways. And so I think the same thing is potentially happening now. Is that what were the centers of power, frankly, the Ivy Leagues, these kind of institutions that were, where you had to go to create certain types of opportunity, or these top schools in general. I think that is being challenged. I think they will continue to always have a role, but the pressure to actually have to just go there or it's nothing, I think in many ways that is being and challenged, because when you think about COVID-19, there is the ideas of, do you even have to have a physical space? Do you have to have all these endowed buildings? All of that is now being rethought in many interesting ways. And I think that for our kids, the non-traditional route might be really interesting for them. Non-traditional route might become the new normal, so to speak. And how awesome would that be? That they could think really out of the box. They could think about, what would it mean to be an artist? What would it mean to be a sculptor? What would it mean to create some new digital medium itself? And I think that is taking this concept of entrepreneurship into the limit itself. That yes, there are these establishments, and again, I think they do a lot of good in the world, and they're at the forefront of cutting edge medicine. They're at the forefront of cutting edge technology. That research, I think, can, and frankly, can never be replaced in many ways. When it comes to my kids' generation, I want them to be able to look at everything out there that's available to them in the world and realize that the world is their classroom. The world is there for them to learn. And then in many ways, hopefully they'll be able to contribute back positively to the world as well. We'll see how open-minded I am when they get the report cards and stuff like that, or tests. But I'm at least saying that for now, and they'll have it on record. Oh gosh, my first job was helping my mom set up her medical office when she was just starting out, and she had to print out these flyers for advertisements. She was a radiologist by training, and then took several years off to raise myself and my two sisters. And by the time she returned to the field of medicine and radiology, it had changed so much that she then decided to go to China and study East Asian medicine, acupuncture, and combine that with her traditional medical degree to create a pain clinic of sorts in St. Louis, Missouri. And so we had to advertise. She had no patients. She had no business at the time. So she would print out these black and white posters. And my first job
was to color them in using literally Crayola crayon to color them in, because I don't think color printing was around that time, or it was like prohibitively expensive. And so my first job was to help be an advertiser for my mom and her business. My second distinct job was at Yale. They have this janitorial job that is the most high-paying job per hour that you can do. And basically, after the students leave the school for the school year, and prior to reunions happening, you have to clean up the campus. And so they mobilize students that are willing to basically clean up students' dorm rooms. And if you can imagine how disgusting it is, take that and multiply it by 10. I mean, the things that I saw, I'm trying to erase from my mind. But it was an indelible experience to be a janitor for several weeks, cleaning up, going up into reunions as well. But it was a really memorable experience for me.
Yeah, I think that my grandfather inspired this in amongst our family members, and he was the entrepreneur that I had mentioned, and he really impressed upon us that whatever you do, it doesn't matter if you are a janitor or a professor, a medical doctor, or a lawyer, or a business person, a violinist, an actor or actress. Be the best person in that field, essentially. So if you're a janitor, be the best janitor. I've come around and modified it a little bit to be a little bit more growth mindset, which is be the best person in your field that you can be, essentially. And I think that is really important as this generation, the next generations to come, thinks about their first jobs or what they want to do, essentially, is that put yourself in a position that isn't necessarily the most prestigious or anything like that. Put yourself in a position where you're going to learn, and put yourself in a position where you are going to be your best self, where you can learn to be your best self. And that comes with having the right mentors around you and the right kind of setup itself. But it doesn't mean you have to go to kind of the brand names or anything like that, or put your pressure to go to X, Y, and Z position. I think to the point of your show being called My Way, I really like that name. And I'm not just paying lip service to what sounds. I do think
thanks, Eric.
Have to give a shout out. But I do think that it's really important that folks feel courage to go the non-traditional route. Now, obviously, there's practical realities of paying for student loans and making a living and being able to provide for your family. I think that I totally get that, and I have a great empathy for that as well. But if you can use that kind of idea, that growth mindset, that whatever you go into, you're going to be your best version of yourself in, I think that will actually separate you from the pack. You're going to work that much harder. You're going to be that much more passionate about what you're doing. You have better ideas and greater creativity. And so I'm excited for hopefully my kids to approach whatever they do with that mentality. Yeah, that was a really interesting experience. I was a junior in college, and I was actually thinking about joining the Marine Corps and their officer training program in Quantico. And the two alternative paths that I'd kind of laid out for that summer for me was to either go to McKinsey, which I thought was like a 1 in a million shot. They were only recruiting couple of folks on campus for the summer internship, and to also convert into a full-time role was an even kind of smaller percentage chance, or to pursue kind of this officer training program because I love the nobility of service and I love the idea of serving one's country itself, and that really stood out to me. And so I was very fortunate to go through that interview process and receive an opportunity for the summer that then translated into a full-time offer post-college. But to your question, the second question around, why did I go work at a startup? Well, first of all, the dot-com bust had recently happened during that time. And so I think McKinsey was very happy for me to defer a year because there was probably not a lot of business going on at that time. And then secondly, for me, I had always had this yearning, and I think yearning is the right word, is to go back to my motherland, so to speak, to go back and to learn the language more fully, to experience the culture. And I had the opportunity to do that for a year, and then to also work at a startup that was in high tech. And that even back then, South Korea was at the forefront of chip technology. And the startup was in the mobile phone space, more on the hardware side that would then enable video and gaming and all the stuff that you see in these fancy phones today. But that was a really unique opportunity for me to just try something different and then also get in touch with my roots as well. Oh, it was really eye-opening. And I realized how hard the work culture in South Korea is. I thought about maybe staying on and continuing on at, maybe work in the McKinsey Seoul office, for example. But what I realized was that I wanted to potentially use my privileged position of being a Korean American, that I could come and maybe come back to Korea someday and have even greater impact after I learned how to do things in the US. And frankly, for me, I thought it would be very challenging for me to do well in South Korea as well. As much as I was able to identify with the culture, it was not like I had grown up there. I hadn't done my army service there. I would be perceived as an outsider. But I had like this deep longing and yearning to be part of that culture, to get back in touch and to contribute back. I had this great sense of just wanting to belong, even though I'm sure lots of people didn't think I belonged there.
I agree.
Right?
Well, I'm with you on that one.
And I've been so fortunate to come full circle that several years later, because of that experience in Korea and actually working on the mobile phone space, I was able to invest in this very small company called Kakao, which became, Kakao Talk, and is now a $29 billion company in South Korea, and powers, 99% of the population, adult population, uses Kakao Talk on a day-to-day basis.
Wow.
And I was one of their first institutional investors, and I was glad that maybe some small way, being able to take some of what I had learned in Silicon Valley and that perspective was value add to something that was near and dear to my heart, communications in South Korea on a platform that became Kakao Talk. That was cool to see, and I would never have been able to predict that or forecast that when I was there, right after college. But again, like now in retrospect, I do think that for folks that have that yearning or just something in their gut that says, I really want to connect with this geo or with these kind of people or with this topic or this passion, like, look, you're going to have your whole life to do the mechanical things right, to get paid, to do career trajectory, to do all these things. But it's actually that part of our heart and that our spirit that has a connection to things that are inexplicable in some ways. I was like a Midwest dude growing up in Missouri that like could barely, taste kimchi in many ways. Like what business did I have? But I had this seed, maybe it was in my blood, to like want to reconnect to my roots. And so if you have that inkling, like listen to that. That's a really important part of your gut instinct, your who you are as a person, I think, as well.
Sorry, I totally off topic.
No. So for you, really what your heart yearned for drove your Eric's way, basically.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah, I think that Stanford asked a really astute question in their application process. And the question is simply, what's most important to you and why? And I had felt like that was a really important question for me to explore, and was able to do that through an MBA program. That question challenged me to really think about what was most important to me. For me, that is my faith, and then also the, the expression of my faith to be of service. So service is one of the most important things to me, and it is inspired by my faith. And so, interestingly, my MBA experience wasn't about learning accounting and marketing and HR and inventory supply chain management. It was learning to listen to that calling, or to listen to what was most important to me, and maybe gave me an opportunity to think about how I would express this uh, desire to be of service to others.
Right. Yes. So I'll lay out what buy side means for your listenership, and then totally destroy it, the definition of it, and
Ooh, okay.
I think there's a lot of misnomers in how people think about it at this point. So traditionally, buy side is differentiated from sell side, where sell side is traditionally where you are the client services business, where you are serving clients as a consultant or an investment banker, but you're not putting money to work per se. And buy side, again, traditionally has been thought of, you are then able to transition to a position of having capital to then deploy and invest, versus giving advice and being of service to others. I was able to go to a firm called Maverick Capital after my MBA program, and that was my shot to invest, to have a checkbook, and to be able to put my investment acumen to work, so to speak, and test out my hypotheses. Essentially, it was a great training experience, because what I would say is that most folks will be able to do the analysis that is required to make an investment. It's being able to stomach the ups and downs that really, I think, would make someone suited to be an investor, because we're wrong all the time. We're probably wrong more times than we're right, actually. But it's willing to be able to double down in those instances where you are right, so that because you can make a 30x or a 50x return, it makes up more than makes up for the difference for all those times that you're wrong. But you have to almost be blind to your mistakes, or you have to learn very quickly, is probably the better way to look at it, so that you can continue to double down on those winners. Now, that is the buy side, so to speak. But I am on this crusade to completely change that word, that when I hear the word buy side, because I think when you are an investor, you are a steward of capital. So you are always on the sell side. You are always in service of others. And so many times when you have a checkbook or you have capital put to work, frankly, you become arrogant. Frankly, you become like, hey, I've got all this money I can put to work, and now people have to listen to me, so to speak. And that probably comes when you're buying out businesses and you're majority owners and all these things. I do think, though, the investors that I have admired the most are ones that approach investing from a stewardship and from a service perspective. And so if you are so privileged as to manage other people's capital, or even your own capital, which is a resource of this world, how do you put that to service? How do you put that to service for your entrepreneurs, for the consumer products and the consumers that those products end up serving? How do you put all that to work for other people? And if you start to think about it from an egocentric perspective, that is where I think the word
where buy side comes from. But if you think about it from a service perspective, I think that's actually where we can do our best work as investors. Yeah, we have 5 core values at Goodwater, and service is one of them. The others are humility, quality, integrity, transparency. And we just added a 6th value of justice, where we seek to bring justice and to bring respect to all people in all our work that we do. And so I do think that going back to my Stanford Business School essay, like what's most important to me, and I would say this is a representative of everyone at our firm, it is to be of service to others and to have a justice and an equality lens to our work, how we evaluate investments, how we evaluate the other employees that join our firm, how we evaluate investors that invest in our fund as well. Do they also align with our idea of being of service to others and to frankly bring justice to this world in our own small way?
When we started Goodwater, we didn't think that the world needed just another venture capital firm. There is so much capital out there today. But what if we could have a mission orientation and a values driven approach to empowering exceptional entrepreneurs? We chose consumer tech specifically because if you look at some of these consumer tech horizontal platforms, think about the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Netflix, the Spotifys, the Apples of the world. These are, and Google, not to mention Google, these are some of the most influential companies in the world. They impact our day-to-day consumer lives, and they're controversial in many ways. Privacy, protections, all these things are front and center of the news. We wanted to create a firm, a custom-built firm that would be in the messy gray area, that would be involved with these companies, that would become impactful to them, to somehow, even if it's by 1 degree, put them on a trajectory more towards positive impact, if possible. And so the reason we chose consumer tech is that it is one of the most powerful forces in the world. The reason we're called Goodwater is that similarly, water is like technology and capital. It's a resource that needs to be stewarded. It's very powerful. It can be used for good things and it can be used for bad things. Water is the source of life for every living organism on this planet. But the lack of water or too much water can lead to death and destruction. We want to be the Goodwater in the venture capital ecosystem. So we came with this value kind of based mission orientation to the market. I would say that in many ways, we always fall short of that initial ambition. Like, it's so hard to stay true to your values, to our mission, but we strive for it. It is something we remind ourselves. We have physical cards of it laid out around the office. It's virtually there digitally for us as well. And I think that is what is so fulfilling, that it's not to say I couldn't do that at my pre-existing firm or at another firm, but we wanted to just start that so that I could really fully express that value of service, and that other people that might be like-minded could also join that journey as well.
Yeah, that's I think one of the most important or rewarding aspects of being an investor. We have this concept that we want to be the first call. And what does that mean? Is that like 2 a.m., some big problem happens, or an entrepreneur is not able to sleep because he or she is struggling with an issue. We want to be the first call, preferably not at 2 a.m., but that's fine. I get those calls. But that's such a privilege to be in to be in that position to help entrepreneurs. We do a lot of the tactical advice and the coaching around what it means to be excellent at X, Y, and Z tools or capabilities to build a company. But it's actually being in those moments where a big decision needs to be made. Do we take this capital? Do we sell or do we not? Do we launch this product? Should I hire the CEO, COO, or other C-level executive? What do I do about this ethical issue? What do I do about X, Y, and Z issue? We want to be their first call for an entrepreneur because we hope they trust us, that we have sound advice, and that they feel like we always have their back no matter what. I know we fall short of this all the time, and we probably give in at times to this buy side mentality that it's all about us. And it's so easy to see that. You see in the news how much investors are put on pedestals and all these things, and we really try to protect against that. We really try to not let our egos come to the forefront because we know they exist. I mean, it's natural for people to want to have accolade, to have wealth, and all these things. I think that is part of the human condition in many ways, but we try to call it out preemptively so that it reminds us that though those things may exist in the back of our mind, we really need to put front and center our mission and our calling to service, because that's actually what's most important itself. But it's hard. I mean, I will admit that it is, we're not perfect by any means.
Yeah, I think that it's totally this concept of, I think everyone says this, like, don't be afraid to fail, or don't be afraid to hear lots of no's and all those things. Um, I think that is, I agree with that. I agree with the concept of cold calling actually, and being bold to put your message out there and see who's willing to pick up, so to speak. I think my advice though is to make it personal. If you're going to reach out to someone, do your research. Figure out what makes them tick as much as possible. Figure out what could be of value to them. Don't take the same email or same intro and blast it to 100 different investors or resources out there. Make it custom. I'd rather entrepreneurs spend time on 5 leads than 100 leads, and make those 5 leads really, really good. And customize your messaging, do your homework, and go out and make those quality. So I constantly emphasize to entrepreneurs who are raising capital, whether you're a seed stage or even a later stage pre-IPO company, quality over quantity. Quality really matters. And that, I think, is really important for entrepreneurs who are raising capital in this day and age.
That's right. If they ultimately, even I articulated, I want to be an entrepreneur's first call. That makes me at least feel much better than just being their capital provider.
Right.
Help substantively, that is also the case. But I do think that entrepreneurs need to think about who do they want at their cap table? Who do they want to be calling when there's an issue? And if you can express that in a pitch, if you can express that there is some alignment between your underlying investors and your mission as a company, that is really cool. I think that's where the magic happens. Look, we're a growing enterprise as well. When we started in 2014, we had $0 of AUM next to our name, right? And we had to pitch investors to invest into our funds early on as well. And I think showing that alignment and talking with the right investors that also thought long term, that also thought about how do you change and provide positive impact? How do you think about the horizontal and the network effects of consumer tech? Folks that were really aligned with that naturally gravitated towards us as well. But we had to be clear about our marketing, our position, and why we could align with them in the first place, and why it was custom to those investors. I think that the same thing goes for entrepreneurs as well.
Very valuable advice. I like how you want to make everything more personal. It's a heart-to-heart connection, not just business.
Right. I think that alignment is the same thing. It's the same thing that's true in your love life as it is in your business life, that is with your relationship with your,
your parents or your kids. Just knowing that we're not commodities, that this is about relationships at the end of the day. And in my business, capital is one expression of that, but it's really about the relationships we have with one another that makes this such a fascinating field to be in.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm in my 40s, and I hope that I'm really in my 20s. Is 20s? I don't know if that flies. You're hearing it first here, folks. Um, but I do think times have obviously changed dramatically, and I think this is where consumer tech, it is binary. Can we be helpful here, or can we be hurtful? Do social networks create more distance between people, or are they able to make people feel closer? Are they able to create real relationships, or are they creating fake relationships at the end of the day? That's just one example. I mean, there's lots of others, but let's take that for a second. When we think about investing into consumer tech companies, consumer internet companies, we do have this idea that it can help humanity flourish in some way, shape, or form. When you think about these younger generations, I do have a concern that we're spending way too much time gaming. We're spending way too much time, on the screen and not with one another.
Right.
But what I am excited about is when consumer tech products save people time. Rather than waiting 1 to 2 hours for an urgent care visit or to wait outside an ER room, if I can click a button and get connected to a doctor for a telemedicine visit within 30 seconds or maybe 5 minutes if there's a little bit of a lag time, that allows me to spend more time with my loved ones. Let's get a little bit closer to what is more controversial. Take a platform, a dating app platform, a social network platform. If I can utilize that to gain new perspectives or to connect with people that might be more aligned with me and use data to do that, that's exciting. That's interesting. I think that is pushing us to be better in many ways. But if I'm using that to make not good choices, or with my time, or with people, or that I feel like I'm not able to connect with others in a more meaningful way, that is also something we have to be really cognizant of as consumer tech investors, to say there is a balance here, and we need to be very subjectively objective, if that makes sense, around what is right and what is actually helpful to other people at this point and to people in general. I'll give you an example. Marco Polo is this short form video communication company that we love. It's likened to a social network. You can only connect with other people. But they have this thesis that instead of sending people text messages all day, I'd rather send you a face-to-face video communication because that's more personable. It was actually started so that the founders, it's a husband and wife set of founders, could be in touch with their extended relatives, their grandparents, and have their kids interface with them. But people are busy, they're not able to do things synchronously all the time, but they didn't want to just send emails and text messages. They wanted to send these short form videos of their kids playing and show that kind of real sense of their community through that app. And so they created it. And I do think that is bringing people closer. It's less fake than some of the other social kind of consumer tech norms that are out there, I would say. I think the way we translate this, it's very aligned. I don't know if we're like a triple bottom line company or anything like that, but I do think that we're very aligned that because we want to have the most impact, we want to be the highest ownership investors in the most influential companies in the world. So think today, what are the most influential companies? We talked about them earlier. Google, Facebook, Netflix, Spotify. They're literally changing Amazon. They're changing commerce, Square, PayPal. They're changing payments. They're changing how we connect, Facebook. They're changing media, Netflix, Spotify. Those are the most influential companies in the world today. Now forecast 10 years from now. If we do our job right, we will have high levels of ownership for the next generation of the most influential companies in the world as venture capital investors. That will naturally translate into presumably very good returns for our investors over time. Because if we're really small investors or we're investors in non-influential companies, they're likely not worth a lot, frankly. But this recipe is our North Star. It's how we operationalize ourselves and also how we can have maximum impact on the world. Caffeine.
That always helps.
It helps, though not too much, not after 2 p.m. I guess it's past 2 p.m. already, but
oops.
So look, I'm actually not good at this. I don't say no enough. I am trying. I actually always wanted to be someone who like said yes to everything and just tried a lot of different things, and that's kind of stayed with me. And I have heard that prioritizing and saying no to things is actually a good way to make sure you get done and what you need to get done. But if you're busy with what you're passionate about, you're actually learning to be really highly effective in an efficient manner because you never get burnt out. And this is what my college minister said to me, is like, you will never experience burnout if you are pursuing what you love to do. And burnout is a sign that you're actually pursuing things that you don't really love and aren't interested in. And so you can look at the fruit of your labor as a clear sign that what you're doing is impactful and that you find great energy from it. And that's something I think is, I don't have like time management tools. Again, I'm like really bad at that stuff. But what I do encourage people to do is to think about when you have look back at your life and you think about what gave you most energy throughout your career or throughout your personal life. Think about each of those moments. There's probably like 2 or 3 moments in your life where you're like, wow, that gave me a lot of energy. That was really impactful to me. And then try to connect the dots themselves. For me, one of the things that gave me some of the most energy I've ever experienced was doing a research paper during college on neurolinguistics. And I was researching people with brain lesions, so literally holes in their brains that were English speaking versus Korean speaking, and the difference in how they would speak and what parts of the grammatical tree they would be missing. And not to get into too much detail, but what I loved about that research paper was that it pulled in all these interdisciplinary aspects. It was multilingual, English and Korean speaking. It was tying into, you had to code, so some computer science. It was philosophy, it was logic, it was psychology, it was neurobiology. All these elements coming together to write this paper. So for me, what I get a lot of energy out of is interdisciplinary components, things that bring in disparate things to create something more beautiful together. And I can do that day in, day out. I have a lot of energy. That's why I love technology and venture capital, is that innovation happens at the intersection of industries. It's not like the next great payments company. Jack Dorsey had nothing to do with payments before he started Square. He just had a really bad experience at a fair, a market fair, trying to buy a painting that he really wanted, but he didn't have cash. And so he's like, this is messed up. Everyone should be able to pay digitally or use a credit card anywhere they wanted. And he disrupted it. So innovation and disruption comes at the intersection of things. I get a lot of energy out of that. So I think that's what I just encourage folks to think about, like, what gave you a lot of energy in your past? Tie those together and do that every single day on a going forward basis. Oh, so this is very top of mind for me. And Pastor Dave Gibbons is a close friend. He's an advisor to us at Goodwater. And I'm very much in the present around this right now, that I do think the goal amidst this, all the crises that we're in, is not to go back to normal. So this physical office being filled with work, that's wonderful. That would be great. But that is not the goal of what we should be pursuing right now. We should be using this as an opportunity to think back. What have we normalized in our mind? What is abnormal that we had made normal? And this is the time for change. That out of all this chaos, the beauty of change can happen. And so what I'm really focused on right now is impact and is change. And we've put in this core value around justice. I think now is our opportunity to fully express this as much as possible, whether that is with our portfolio companies, whether it's with our value system, whether it's with the people we partner with or the people we hire. I think that we really need to think about who has been excluded to date and who has been included. And if you start to think about bringing those that have been excluded, and I got this from Caroline Hill from 228 Accelerator, and someone that I'd love to put you in touch with. I think her story is amazing. Is that as you continue to bring in the folks that are excluded into the included, that is moving us towards a beautiful future in many ways. And so I know I'm talking at very high levels. I'm still trying to figure out like how that is fully expressed. I know we have a role to do that, pursuing that here at Goodwater. And so I think my next, the past 6 years has been grinding and trying to get this company up and running and all this platform. And I hope for the next 60 plus years is about really amplifying our impact itself and thinking about this core value of justice, thinking about how we can bring those who have been excluded to become included, and not just included, as Caroline would say, not just to survive, but to thrive. And so that I think is what I feel really called to do, to get out of the echo chamber, frankly, of Silicon Valley, to be out and to have impact, I think is something that's really top of mind for me. And so we have this once in a lifetime opportunity. And whether you're 10 years old, 20 years old, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, anyone that's listening to this, right? This is our like once in a lifetime opportunity to actually impact and have change. It's during times like this that most change happens. And so let's not waste it. Yeah, that's not the goal. The goal is not to go back to normal. The goal is to move towards a brighter future, for sure. Top 3 advice. I would say that it's the same advice that I got from a mentor early on. And I'm going to just pare it down to 1 for now, because I think this is the most important, especially for your 20s where you're going into careers. You might be working for someone else. You may not have started your own company, or you may be taking on capital or investor capital. Even if you're starting your own company, you may be pursuing your own thing like you are, Jasmine. And but the most important thing is that before you enter the business world or before you enter someone else's environment, and I say this for even employees that are joining Goodwater, write down what are your top 5 values themselves. Because wherever you go, whether it's a McKinsey or a startup, or you create your own company, you take investor capital on, you start your own blog, you are going to be sucked into another set of values as well.
And you're going to drink the Kool-Aid. It's going to be great. And those values can become part of your values as well. But 8 priorities prior to starting any job or setting out on any journey, or if you're already set out, take a moment, take a break, and write down the 5 things that are most important to you. Literally write them down. I still have the same piece of paper. I wrote them down when I was 21, 22 years old. And memorialize it, codify it, because it's so easy to lose yourself when you join another corporate culture. Corporate cultures are strong for a reason. They've survived for a very, very long time because they are strong. And so you're going to be naturally pulled into that line of things. So setting up yourself up for success early on with regards to your value system is incredibly important and something that I would have re-emphasized to my 20-year-old self.
My vision of success is that I'm on my deathbed. I would be able to say when I'm on my deathbed, like, you just left it all on the field. And the only reason that I would regret dying at that point is because I was having so much fun doing what I was doing and felt so much passion and so much fulfillment in serving other people, and that I wish I had another day to do that. Mm-hmm. I really think that is our best versions of ourselves, and where we can find success and happiness and fulfillment. We have to be willing to go through the crucible for that, and to be, it's not always easy, and it's really hard. And the intention has to be pure over time. And again, we fall short of it all the time. But for me, I have this vision of success. Like, I'm on my deathbed, and my only reason for crying is that I didn't have another day to do what I love to do. But otherwise, I felt like I had left it all on the field and didn't have any regrets. Amen. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much. Bye.
Who's My Way will we explore next? Please like, subscribe, and share, and let's go find out together.